Hey, Mom. Yes, you.
Correct. Stubborn and secretly armed away in a void. But once she confires her with love, my logical character may be orange grey. I can give the light no more than a stranger's look. How much may grow
Hello and welcome to the Court of the Wenton King.
What episode is this now?
57?
57.
I think. We're doing a new artiste. This is a proper artist we're going to do 3 albums of. That's very exciting. We did Genesis a while ago, didn't we?
Yeah.
And in Genesis, one particular member of Genesis obviously had an extremely fruitful solo career which sort of transcended the rest of them. Not in a commercial way, but certainly artistically. And that person, of course, is Steve Hackett. But apart from that, we're going to do Peter Gabriel, because he's very good. In 1974, stuff happened. That stuff that happened was that King Crimson disbanded. That's the most important thing that happened in 1974. And Robert Fripp went to become a monk or something, I don't know, that kind of stuff. And sort of came back, but working in a very different way than how he worked with King Crimson. His reasons behind leaving King Crimson meant that he didn't really want to go back to this huge business of it. He talked about small, intelligent, mobile units, which is just a way of saying you want to be kind of like if you can be a hired gun, you can go and do lots of different things. You're free from the clutches of record executive suits and all that sort of stuff. And during this time, he did a trilogy of albums in a way, which was Peter Gabriel's second album, a solo album, and Daryl Hall's album from Hall & Oates, strangely. And that was part of this project he had called The Drive to 1981. But before he did that, he played on Heroes, and he played on Peter Gabriel's first album, this one, which is interesting. I think there's parallels with why Peter Gabriel left Genesis and why Fripp left King Crimson. It's not completely the same. They both believed that the music was excellent at that point. Both bands were fantastic at that point, and they both agree on that. It doesn't mean they were happy. And it's hard for listeners of the music to understand. When things are so awesome, why would you leave? And Peter Gabriel had to leave Genesis, and he wrote a song about it. And it's on this album. This is a really fascinating album because it's transitional. It's almost like prehistory. It's not really his first album. You can tell he hasn't really decided what he wants to do yet. He's just doing stuff. It must have been so exciting. There was no agenda. There was no plan. There was no nothing. He just wrote stuff and thought, well, we could do that. Or we could do that. And consequently, stylistically, the album is kind of weird because it's kind of all over the place. There's all different stuff going on. I think it's kind of intentional in that he wanted an album where each song was a different style, which is kind of his description of prog, I think. So I can see what he's doing there, but he's still trying to find out what he's doing. So this is a really interesting piece of history. Not his best album, but certainly to a certain extent he's defining what he would sound like over the next few years. But it isn't as good as what was to come.
It's a tough album because you're sort of balancing certain preconceptions. The comparison with Genesis coming, you start trying to look for what exactly in Genesis was Peter Gabriel. You're looking for those things, and there are a few tropes in there which obviously Peter Gabriel added to Genesis. It seems to be a bit of a foggy, sort of like a Foggy Valley album in the sense that there are definite peaks. There are
average songs.
Very
stylistically, he's defining himself.
Today, everybody tells us we should talk about sex children, but nobody tells us just how.
But the songs aren't quite there yet. They didn't come till the second album. They're not. It's all good. It's all good. But in terms of sort of definitive Peter Gabriel song, there's sort of 2.5 songs on.
I always thought what Peter Gabriel added to Genesis was a level of interest, and it wasn't through stylistic variation. Yeah. There's a lot of things I appreciate. There seemed to be some kind of link with sort of like long form poetry, almost in the sense that he looks at the past and he tackles religious
heavy stuff.
Heavy stuff,
Yeah.
yeah. And I really like that, which gives the music ideas. But he managed to do that without being too clunky, not battering you over the head with it.
Yeah,
And he did it with a wit
Yeah.
and a humour. So that's what I'm looking for in this. And it's there in places, but as you say, it does feel very grabby. You know, what am I going to do? And because it's so disparate, you start trying to listen for threads that hold it all together, and they're not there.
Yeah, there isn't a thread that holds it together at all. But that makes it interesting. I'm lucky in that I didn't buy that one first. So for me, you can see actually this is the remaster, because I didn't have it for years and years. I probably bought it about 2002 maybe, something like that. Yeah, which is when this came out.
I was actually kind of expecting that it would be the music and the arrangements that would let it down, because his drive for Genesis was the lyrics. He wasn't,
Some
really
of the time.
a musician.
I mean, but only really on the Lamb. Yeah. His musical input, minus the Lamb, his musical input was only a little bit, which is part of the problem. And obviously the process of him saying, right, I'm the singer, I should be writing the lyrics, at least, and probably the vocal melodies, caused great upset and made things very difficult.
And that was the point I was sort of making, that actually musically and the arrangements, some really good arrangements on there, and you don't see any of that at all. It actually feels a little bit cleaner than some Genesis.
He's completely abandoned all of that in a way. The only thread between solo Gabriel and Genesis is the Lamb, and this is nothing like the Lamb really. It's more that he's abandoned, in a way, he's abandoned all the stuff you talked about. I mean, it's all about being in the real world rather than playing characters and being abstract and all that stuff. It's supposed to be more about it's just him now, which is interesting. Well, that's a good thing.
I think that's initial impression. That's what I find a little bit disappointing. Actually, I think there's some songs on there which seem a little bit lacking in weight. They're a little bit.
Yeah, it doesn't have the weight. Certainly the Lamb, obviously, but the Genesis-ness isn't there. I hate the production. Horrible, muddy production. Produced by Bob Ezrin. I mean, I like Bob Ezrin. He's great. Obviously, he did The Wall and he did Alice Cooper and stuff like that. I like what he produced the last Deep Purple album, who are an unproducible band, really, so he did well there. But I think that was a mistake, getting Bob Ezrin in and making a big sound and getting the London Symphony Orchestra to play on your album. Peter Gabriel and the type of songs in it, I don't think that's quite right. And obviously the technology isn't there to make it sound good. It sounds muddy and all mush.
Because the one thing that struck me was it's not very guitar-y.
It's not very guitar-y, is it? That's the thing. Robert Fripp is on it, apparently, but there's no evidence of him being on it. I couldn't tell you which bits he plays and which bits the other guys plays at all. The only guitar-y bit is the blues song.
Track one.
Track one is Moribund The Burgermeister. Fantastic title. And I think that's actually very Genesis-y. The song itself, it's alright. It does introduce stylistically what he's going to do, but it's not amazing. And I did, when I bought the album for the first time, and I only knew Solsbury Hill and Here Comes the Flood. It surprised me that it opened with this random song.
It's funny, the first time I heard this, I associated this with Slippermen for some reason. Sound effects are going on and
synthy stuff,
which I did appreciate. I quite liked it. So there I am. I'm thinking, okay, this is going to be Peter Gabriel Genesis.
Yeah.
Because I'm feeling the links with the previous work, but that didn't continue.
So next song,
Solsbury Hill.
Solsbury Hill. This is his famous song. I assume if you ask someone what songs did Peter Gabriel do, they'll say Sledgehammer. And I would assume that second they would say Solsbury Hill, because this is the pop sing. Remember, he's tried to do an album of different styles, and this is the pop sing, and it was a hit. So he did have a hit right at the start, which is interesting. Seeing as subsequently he kind of didn't have a hit, but on the first album he had a big hit with Solsbury Hill, and everybody knows it. It's a song about leaving Genesis. And it's nice and bouncy and happy and...
Again, from the title I thought maybe Selling England by the Pound type song, but no, it's not.
But this is something that's had heavy FM radio rotation forever, for 40 years.
Yeah.
It's that kind of thing. 35 years. When I went to see them, it was in the early 00s, and he rode a bike around the stage singing this song. It was a very high-geared bike, because he plays in the round, so he rode the bike around the stage. Little things like that, I always wondered, at some point he must have fallen off. He's doing that every night. Eventually, you're gonna go off the stage, aren't you?
Yeah. I mean, one of the things about early Genesis was the pastoral element. Did it feel kind of pastoral to you?
Sort of. Yeah.
Evocative of sort of like countrified England.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. He's played this probably for every single solo concert he's ever done, and even the reunion with Genesis concert, they played Salisbury Hill.
Modern Love.
Another song in a way. I mean, it's interesting. Here, you think you've cracked it, and you think, that's what Peter Gabriel solo is like, and he rocks much more than Genesis. People don't realise this now, because obviously as he got older, It doesn't rock now, but it is not, you know, a fantastic song or anything like that. I think this was the second single. Yes, I'm going to go with that. That was the second single, and it sounds like Peter Gabriel, not top drawer.
It sounds quite witty, a witty take on modern love, and that's all it is really. You expect there to be another level there,
yeah,
and it's not there.
Yeah.
And this is what makes it quite an average song.
Yeah, and stuff like that, his voice carries it. Without his voice, it will be nothing. His voice is very much as it was in 1974.
Track 4.
To track 4.
Excuse me.
So yeah, like I said, you think you've cracked it now. And one thing we haven't mentioned is another member of the band, member of the Peter Gabriel band, who remained permanently his bass player, is of course the emperor of the bass guitar, Tony Levin, who had come to Peter Gabriel from a world of playing the tuba. He grew up playing the tuba and playing in barbershop quartets. I assume Peter Gabriel must have said, so what do you do then? And obviously you're going to say, well, that has to go on the album, obviously. Tuba and barbershop quartet, and therefore it's awesome.
It is very good, and it opens with Kermit the Frog singing.
Tony Levin actually did on his own. He did all the vocals to it. There was a King Crimson barbershop quartet song as well, which wasn't an album, but it's quite funny. It's worth listening to.
Yeah, I love it. It's so different and so wacky.
And you don't. It's exactly the right point in the album where you're into a full sense of security.
Yeah, and actually, it sort of thinks, okay, yeah, this is Peter Gabriel. We're having the variation of ideas now. It's gonna deliver.
Yeah,
it's very reassuring. Track 5.
Humdrum. This is an interesting one. I think this is the other song that's quite good for me. I think I think that was reflected in setlist. I think he did play this quite a lot. This is another point where there's a little bit of Genesis-iness in it, but then it goes Latino. So it's Latino Genesis, basically.
I actually thought this was quite forgettable, really. Humdrum.
It's very humdrum.
Yeah, very humdrum.
Okay.
Slowburn.
It's one song in the bank, isn't it? Slowburn. This one is fascinating because this is, I imagine from his perspective, right, let's do a real proper big rock song, which doesn't mean doing Heartbreaker. This is Peter Gabriel does Queen, which seems like such a strange thing. It obviously doesn't sound anything like Freddie Mercury, but musically, I see a lot of similarities there. I've always thought that, but it was still niggling this week when I was listening to it. What does it sound like? And particularly the guitar. It sounds like Bat Out of Hell. The guitar really does sound like, honestly, if you put the two on, this is before Bat Out, so that's really interesting. But again, it's just really interesting because he's trying a different style that he wouldn't really do again. It's even got the backing vocal.
I mean, it gets quite exciting, doesn't it? But more of a curiosity than a Peter Gabriel song.
Yeah.
I think that's similar with a few songs on here,
which are
in the valley.
I think the production doesn't help.
No, it does sound a little bit
muddy.
Yeah. Waiting for the big one.
Waiting for the big one. This is the blues song. It's Peter Gabriel does a blues song, a straight blues song. I have to be honest and say, if I listen to this album, I actually skip this. But that's not really a measurement of how good it is. I don't think. I'm just not interested in that. Doing all the different styles, so he has to do that. That's good.
But what confused me is it's basically like Tim Panelli blues, but two back to back, then a bit of soloing at the end. He could have split this up, I think, and played the different sections of different parts of the album.
Oh,
it might be a bit because it's the longest track on the album.
It is.
It's over 7 minutes, and it gets boring.
I get bored of it.
Yeah.
Well, from my perspective, is that reasonable? It's boring for me. It's boring for you.
It's authentic blues, yeah, and but
there's nothing wrong with it.
I love authentic blues, but authentic blues songs are short, and when you stick, 3 together back to back.
Yeah, if you're going to listen to blues, you're not going to put on a Peter Gabriel album, are you? But it's a good riff, so what's wrong with that? Nothing wrong with that at all.
Next song.
Down
the Dolce Vita.
Yeah, this is like a big, epic London Symphony Orchestra playing in the background, but it's all muddy because of the production. And he's tried to make this huge thing. It's alright. But you wouldn't put that on a Peter Gabriel compilation, put it that way.
I actually, I quite like this one. I couldn't make my mind up whether it was just the arrangement I liked. I like the mix of sort of classic and funk.
Yeah.
Which works quite well.
It made me think of, is it Time by David Bowie on Diamond Dogs?
Diamond Dogs.
It made me think of that a bit.
Whether the Peter Gabriel vocals work along with it, and whether I'm just listening to the big, orchestra stuff and enjoying that, I don't know. I'm actually quite undecided, but I look favourably on it. Maybe I'm looking for an epic on the album.
Yeah,
because they're all short songs, aren't they? And there's no sort of big blah. And this has the hallmarks of an epic, but it doesn't have the length.
Not quite, quite there.
Next one, Here Comes the Flood.
Here Comes the Flood. Now, this is supposed to be the definitive Peter Gabriel song, and he's played it through all his career and etc. etc. I strongly think that this is not the best version of this song, and it is possibly the influence of Bob Ezrin making it into a big, almost turning it into a power ballad, almost ruins it. What is a fantastic song. There's various different versions of it. The best version is actually on Robert Fripp's solo album, which is actually just solo piano. You don't realise that when you put it on, you just think, wow, that was better, that was amazing. But the big production of it lets the song down. The song is better than than this version shows.
I agree with you there, Kev. I was very early. I was down on the song. It's not until I was sort of listening to what was going, because it's an interesting idea. This is a Peter Gabriel concept through and through. And until I picked that up, I was actually thinking, well, this is
just a power ballad.
Power ballad. I'm not really into that. So it's a little bit disappointing. But if there's a better version out there, I'll be up for that.
And it was really interesting. He opened the shows with it.
So you could imagine some amazing theatrics with this.
At this point, of course, he didn't have theatrics on stage. I mean, the later shows, it got bigger than Genesis ever was, with walking upside down and all sorts of stuff going on. But at this point, he had a ladder. That was it. He had a step ladder on stage, and he'd climb up it. And at the start, he'd slide down the step ladder. Very exciting. So that's the first Peter Gabriel album. Any final thoughts?
I'm looking forward to the second ones. The second one with a little bit of trepidation, I have to say. I like the big ideas with Peter Gabriel. He really won me over with The Lamb and Selling England by the Pound. I kind of attributed my lack of appreciation of Trick of the Tail to Peter Gabriel not being there.
Well, the man with the mojo, isn't it? If Genesis lost anything, they didn't lose a big proportion of the writing. They lost their mojo. And Genesis are known for not having any mojo, aren't they?
Uh-huh.
And Peter Gabriel has infinite mojo.
But there are a couple of things on this album which are making me, start to query what he's actually going to do. Are the big ideas going to be there? Find out next week.
We'll find out next week. Tune in next week to find out about the next album, which is called Peter Gabriel. See you next time!